Church doesn't end on Sunday, and neither does the conversation. Welcome to Sundays on Monday, the podcast from First UMC Port St. John, where we take Sunday's message and carry it into your week. Together, we're going to dive deeper into faith, upcoming church events, and how we can live out God's Word every day. Your faith-filled Monday starts right here, because Sunday's message is just the beginning.
Hey friends, welcome to Sundays on Monday, the podcast where we bring Sunday's message into your Monday or your Tuesday or maybe even your Wednesday and beyond. I'm Joby, and today we're exploring one of Jesus' parables that pokes at our sense of fairness, the story of the workers in the vineyard from Matthew 20, 1 through 16.
And I'm Mick. The parable has stirred up conversations for centuries. Why? Because it doesn't sit easy with us. As PC pointed out, we don't take it very good. It didn't easily sit with me on Sunday either at first when I first heard what PC had to say. It threw a wrench into how we think of wages. It threw a wrench into what we think of fairness, and maybe even how we think about grace, how it should work and how it does work. So if you've ever looked at someone else's blessings and thought, hey, what about me? Then you're in the right place. So let's dive into it.
So let's start by walking through the story. It's morning. The landowner goes out to hire workers for his vineyard. He agrees with the first group to pay them a denarius, a fair daily wage back then.
Yeah, that was around 6 a.m. Then about 3 hours later, he hires some more workers. No set pay, just some discussion, promises to pay them basically whatever's right. He does the same thing at noon. He does it again at 3 p.m. and then even later in the day at 5 p.m., just before quitting time.
So at the end of the day, he starts paying. He starts with the 5 p.m. group. And surprise, they get a full day's wage. Now, naturally, the early morning crew sees this and thinks, cool, we're going to get a bonus.
We always want the bonus. But when they get the same denarius, they complain to the vineyard owner. Hey, we bore the burden of the work, or as PC said, we stood out in the hot sun here in Florida and we did more than them. We were in the heat of the day and we completed more tasks than they did.
The landowner responds with something that still echoes in our hearts today. He said, friend, I am not being unfair to you. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Or are you just envious because I am being generous?
So let's just let that story sit for just a moment as we think about that. The story challenges our idea of fairness. In our world, more work should equal more pay. I know that seems logical to me, but when we read this parable, Jesus is saying that the kingdom of heaven doesn't operate by merit. It operates by grace.
That's a little uncomfortable, isn't it? Especially if you're an early worker, someone who's been faithful for a really long time. You think, shouldn't I get more?
Yeah, but it was pointed out to us, grace doesn't follow our economy. Grace doesn't follow that thought process. It's not a paycheck. Grace is a gift.
Exactly. The landowner didn't cheat the early workers. He honored his promise. But when he showed generosity to the others, it exposed what was in the heart of that first group: comparison, envy, entitlement.
Yeah, and we heard from Pastor Chris at Sunday's message, that could be a dangerous thing for us and for these workers in the vineyard. When we compare blessings, we forget about the goodness we've already received. Grace becomes offensive when it feels unfair to us. But that's because we're looking sideways instead of up. Pastor Chris mentioned to us that towards the end of his message, he said, we should always be looking up and not back or forward. We should be looking back. We should be looking forward, not backwards. I'll get it right here in a minute.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah. We should be looking up. We should be looking forward, not backwards. I did listen, Pastor Chris. Just had a hard time reading my notes here, but forward and not backwards. And as a church, we should continue to do that. So let's talk about what does that look like today. I think that was the heart of the message on Sunday. was how does this apply today to us? What are the parallels we see? Some of us are probably sitting there thinking, we deserve more because we've been at this church longer than most people. We've done more. This is my church, and we were reminded about the message a while back. What was that? What was the series that passed?
It's a we church, not a me church. Like, right. It's not about us.
Right. It's not about us. It's about we as the people. Right. So, that was a message that came back was it's about us as a church, not because I've been here longer or I've done more. It's not a merit thing. It's about God's grace.
And I think sometimes, like when you're coming to a new church and you're settling in, I worry that people kind of look and go, okay, like, oh, they're doing, they're singing up there. They must be, getting a lot more whatever. And really,
I can tell you, I'd like to have a lot more people up there singing.
Yeah, me too. Sorry. I was about to be sarcastic, honey, and I'm very sorry. Please forgive me for that.
Sarcasm is free here on this podcast.
Good. And I think, I don't know, like, I don't want anyone to ever look at what we're doing is we're getting it because it's, quote, a paycheck or because we're entitled and we get to go do that. I don't have the greatest voice. I do it because I love Jesus, and I feel incredibly honored and blessed to be able to do that. And I think anything that we're doing for the glory of God at our church, even if it's folding bulletins, even that can be such an incredible blessing. Because I'm going to be honest with you, I'll get a paper cut and I won't enjoy it and it won't be as fun for me. But there are some people that's a really great thing. And as long as we're doing it for the glory of God, all of what we're doing is so critically important.
Yes, as working with the tech team, I love the tech team that we have and the things they've done. I mean, they know that on Sundays, my worship time is playing. I'm not the best guitar player in the world, but I love to play guitar. I love music from that aspect, and I love sharing with our congregation and that. But one of the things I tell the tech team all the time is Sunday's game time. Whatever happens on Sunday happens. We just need to do it for the glory of God. We're not professionals. If we miss a mic cue or we miss an audio cue or we miss a video cue, it's okay. I mean, we're here for the glory of God. Now, the rest of the week, I tell them we need to practice. And tech team, I love you out there, and you guys do amazing things every Sunday for the glory of God to make our worship service better and enjoyable. So thank you for that. But it's not about what we're doing. It's about the talents God has given us. It's about the grace that He's giving us that we can share with not only our church, but our community and the things that we do.
I think one of the things, another point that we were talking about was, I think there's times when you're working really, really hard at your job and you're putting a lot of effort in. And it's very easy to get frustrated when other people who are not giving as much time and effort to the job, and yet they're getting the same paycheck as you, or they're getting accolades from the boss. And sometimes it's easy to feel slighted. And I think that in the real world is where I look at this parable and just have to go back to, yes, my job is great and it's going to give me a paycheck, although I'm a school counselor, so y'all know it ain't that great. But I think it's knowing that I'm doing everything for God's glory. Yeah. It's all about what He's asked me to do.
It's all about what He's asked you to do to grow the next generation, work with the kids. He provides us just what we need, right? And talking about jobs and other things, sometimes we are at a place so long we feel like we deserve it. We're entitled to something. And that's what I love about this parable is it turns the whole idea of fairness on its head, right? And we need to think about it differently because it's not a merit, as we said earlier, it's not a merit-based system. It's a grace-based system. And that's what God is telling us. And, we have had a lot going on in the last couple of weeks. And we as a family and a church family and you and I in particular have had a lot going on. And if it wasn't for the grace of God, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing. And every morning I wake up and on my drive to work, I just thank God for giving us the family we've got, the church community that we've got, the Port St. John community we've got, our work families that we've got, and the people who lift us up and working. So, church family and anybody listening, just think about the people around you. God has given you that gift. God has graced you with those people to help you through this. You're not alone. And Pastor Chris reminded us from last week's message too, to this week's message, that this God's grace, it's not earned. It's freely given. God is giving
lavishly
it to you.
given, like it is absolutely poured out on us if we just open and receive it. And I think one of the things is that I love to talk to people, and I'll use Constantine as an example. Constantine loves to serve other people. It's one of his favorite things to do. And I know that serving other people for Constantine is such an incredible joy that even if someone walked in at the last minute to help serve, Constantine would still look on it as a great and wonderful, joyful thing. And I am so grateful for people that realize that we can serve God every day, all day. And if somebody walks in at the last minute and wants to jump in and help and take credit, we want to make sure we're still taking and enjoying the joy of giving to other people, even if other people are coming at the last second and getting the same accolades or joy or grace.
Yeah, and I think it's not just in the church, right? I mean, it's wherever we are in life, work, our family, in the community, in the world. We need to take those opportunities to help and serve and be the hands and feet of God. And, in this parable, Jesus is telling us, don't miss the joy of being in the vineyard just because someone else showed up late. You're both getting the reward in this. And that's what, just think about this parable, is no matter how much work is done, you're both getting the reward from that. And if you read the parable again in Matthew 20, spoiler alert, the reward is not the denarius. Please don't focus on the denarius or the money that is paid there. It's the invitation from God himself to come into the vineyard, to be part of his crew, if you will, and receive that grace.
Wow, lots of stuff in that story and a lot of things to think about. So, who are you in this story? Maybe you've been in the church for your whole life. Maybe you have showed up and you've served and you've given, and maybe you're wondering if it's even worth it.
I can tell you it is.
True.
But you might still be wondering. You might be. You hear this story, and I'm looking at a couple of my notes here that we took at the service, and Pastor Chris just keeps reminding us here that this story turns fairness on its head, upside down. You might be the 5 p.m. worker. You might feel like, hey, I'm late to faith. I'm getting here late to the game. I'm wondering if it's even worth being here because I showed up late, compared to somebody who's been here with the church the last 30 or 40 years. But one of the things we have to do is come together as a community, as a church community, as a community in Christ, and share the blessing and the grace with others. And we're all there. The invitation of being in the vineyard is very important, to be part of that crew and share. It's not about the merits. It's about working together and receiving the grace of God that's there. One thing I did hear on Sunday is Chris started, as he got to the end of his message, he was like, hey, we need to think about those of us sitting in the pews, those of us who've been part of the church for a long time. We need to rethink where we are, or what are we doing, or what is God calling us to do in the church or in the community? Are we holding the church back? Back to where I was stumbling at the beginning of the podcast is, are we looking forward or are we looking backwards? Right?
Yeah, because if you're looking back, you're missing out on what he's calling you.
Exactly.
For. So one of the things that I wrote was about doing some soul searching. Stop comparing yourself to others. And then the question that I loved is, have I grown so entitled in my service and my faith? Is it more about me than it's about others and bringing them into the family of God? And that's a really great thing to think about it. Remember that we have to trust in his faith and not just rely on the fact that we have his favor. Earning God's blessings and his grace is a very easy thing to do. However, he still wants us to continue to grow and to work and build his kingdom and bring more people to the family.
Yeah, I'll share a personal story for myself. And some of you in the church, some of you in the community may not know this. But 4 years ago, when Chris came to our church, just prior to that, I was one of the early workers. I was doing a lot for the church. I had done a lot to get our tech ministry going. And I say I did that because at the time, that's how I felt. I did a lot of work and I was not happy with where the church was going. And I was about to leave. Some of you may or may not know that, but I'll share that with you because this story really stirred that up in my heart on Sunday. Looking back 4 years ago, where I was at, I was one of those where I was entitled. I felt like I did this, and nobody's recognizing it. And God brought Pastor Chris to our church. And within the first month of just sitting to get to know him and talking to him about what the worship service should be, what the heart of a worship player or worship planner or somebody participating in the worship should be, which is where my position was, playing guitar and doing tech. When he shared that with me, it really put me back. It's like, I didn't do any of this. God gave me a talent to understand some of this stuff that we do in the tech ministry and all, but it wasn't me who put it together. It wasn't, I had taken this attitude of this is my church. I had done this. And you even remember that December before, or that spring before Chris came, I had come home one time and told you, hey, I'm taking all my toys and I'm going home. Right. And,
you did.
And, Chris came into our church. Chris came into my life and we talked and we shared. And it really stirred this up on me on Sunday when he was talking about this message, is how I was one of those early workers. And what it made me realize is 4 years later, here we are, and we're a church, we're a team. We are a group of Christians who are trying to get the grace and blessing out to the lost. And whether I've been here 25 years and put my heart and soul into the church, or somebody's just showing up and starting to put their heart and soul in the church, we're in this together. Our reward is God's grace. Our reward is being invited into the vineyard that God has laid out for us. And going from that point, it was an eye opener for me to think about it and change my thought process, me personally, right? And I think you've seen that in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Okay. But anyway, I just wanted to share that personal story because it really did hit home with me when Chris was talking about this, where my heart was 4 or 5 years ago when Chris came. So again, this parable, I think, as we said, has been a conversation for centuries among everyone. And I think you should go back and read it again. I think if you missed the sermon, you should go check it out at our website or our YouTube channel. I'm sorry, First United Methodist Church at FUMC PSJ on YouTube, and listen to the sermon again, the message. It was great from that aspect. But let's reflect on this. Let's look at it. So let's get into the end here. And again, I like to end with a challenge. So I want to challenge you all the listeners out there. I want to challenge you this week. Instead of asking, what did I earn? Try asking yourself, what have I been given?
And instead of grumbling about someone else's blessings, let's practice celebrating them. Let grace be good news for everyone, not just you.
Yeah, maybe we take time this week to thank God for the simple fact that we've been invited into the vineyard. Whether we've been walking with him for years or we just started walking with him, your seat at the table is very real and it is undeserved. God's grace is unearned. God's grace is freely given.
So, what part of this parable hits home for you the most? Have you ever felt like an early worker or a latecomer? Maybe it's time to really think and spend some time thinking about it and how you can become more of the person that God's asking you to be.
And hey, if this episode encouraged you, I want to ask you to share it with a friend who might need to hear it, who might need to hear that grace doesn't keep score. It's freely given. Share it with somebody you know.
And if you're a small group leader or a Sunday school teacher, this parable makes a great discussion topic. Feel free to use this episode as a springboard.
And that's it for today, friends. We'll see you next episode with more grace, more truth, and more Jesus. Until then, Whether you showed up at dawn or you showed up at dusk, know this: God's glad you came.
And so are we. So take care, stay grateful, and live like grace is real, because it absolutely is.
This is Sundays on Monday, brought to you by First UMC Port St. John. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, share, and stay connected with us throughout the week. Have thoughts, questions, or prayer requests? We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep the faith, live with purpose, and remember, Sunday's message is just the beginning. See you next episode.